Mangrove snapper are one of the trickiest fish in the Gulf to consistently target. Throughout the year, they definitely eat different ways. They definitely are on different spots, and sometimes they're more active than others. I typically try to get them a lot on light jig heads. Just kind of they'll come up in the water column and eat them on the drop. Right now in the springtime, we try to target them on some of these deeper ledges, wrecks, and whatnot. This is a ledge about 20 miles offshore, and you can see all these mangrove snapper down here. The depth finder was showing schools of fish that would come up to 40 feet, 50 feet, just all over the place, and we weren't getting any bites. And I knew this spot had snapper like this. I mean, just absolutely clouds of them. And I was like, maybe they're just not on right now. We'll leave. We'll come back later because I think these fish might be more active, when the sun's going down. As the water gets warmer, they will eat a lot more at night. They'll eat a lot more up in the water column, that type of thing. So I'll just show the spot real quick. It's, like I said, just a small ledge. Nothing really too crazy about it. We'll get some hogfish on it, some gag grouper and whatnot. But year-round, it tends to hold lots of mangrove snapper like this. There's been some days where we get real good bites on it, and you'll get 6-7 pound fish, which fight like gags. It's awesome to get them that big in fairly shallow water. So as the camera swings around here, let me just speed it up slightly. We're kind of just moving the Rodan around, trying to get right on the structure. It's only about 2 feet of relief. It's nothing too crazy. Okay, so now we're getting a little closer. It's just, if you can see here where my cursor is, there's a little ledge right there. You can see all these snapper. So you can see the little ledge here, and what there will be is really big mangoes sitting pretty much in the crack, almost like gag grouper would do or red grouper would do. And I think the times that I've gotten the best bites here, we're fishing fairly close to the bottom, getting the baits right in this crack, and these fish are not really too aggressive to get out away from it. And so that's why having a Rodan's nice, because as you're moving around, you can get right in the spot. So you can see these mangrove snapper. That one right there, that's a big mango, and he's these bigger ones are right in the stuff, and these smaller fish are the ones further out away from the structure. And there's like some of these mangoes, like that's a big mango. There's more big ones over here, are sitting very tight to this, and so there you can see this is probably the best shot of the little ledge that I get. Let me back up slightly. So big mango there, and so nothing too crazy, but this spot for whatever reason holds a lot of these big mangrove snapper. And the best bites I've had is almost when the water's kind of colder and these fish are sitting right in the ledge, and you're able to get the baits presented fairly naturally right in front of them on 3/8 quarter-ounce jig heads, stuff like that, light current. They never really want to seem to chum up versus, fishing a wreck where you'll get these big snapper up off the bottom a little bit. So this was, 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I'm like, well, let's run out a little deeper. We can hit the spot on the way back in. So what we did is we ran to a ledge just a little bit deeper where you can see the ledge as the camera's dropping here. Sometimes I'll get these fish a little more fired up if they're being more aggressive, trying to get, that afternoon bite going. And I know this has a lot of scamp grouper, mangrove snapper, just a bigger profile of a ledge, so you'll get, more of the fish that you might see on a wreck. Camera hits the bottom here. We've got some grunts. We've got some snapper. Nice mix of fish. Nothing quite as spectacular as that first spot where, just mangrove snapper everywhere. So there's your scamp grouper. There's some porgies here. And so what was happening when we were fishing the spot is we were hooking fish on the bottom. The bite was a little better, but we were getting, taken by the tax man. In this case, Let me go forward a little bit. So when you hear people talk about a taxman, usually they mean sharks. But when you're fishing the bottom, sometimes this is your taxman. Bam, nice Goliath grouper living in this ledge. Now, yeah, he's a pain, but he helps keep this ledge nice and big, keeps the bottom cleaned out. I know people that run into Goliaths out in like 200 feet of water on hard bottom. A lot of times those Goliaths are good because they're cleaning out the bottom for the bigger grouper, the black grouper, or the carbo grouper, if you want to go by the true term, or the big gags. Those Goliaths can really move some sand and dirt and make good structure. But when you're trying to catch mangoes and these scamps that we were trying to get on this ledge, he was a little bit of a pain. I think he probably took 4 or 5 of our fish. Maybe there might even be multiple Goliaths. This ledge isn't too far from wrecks where there's dozens of them, and it's kind of one of the problems now when you fish these bigger structures, ledges, reefs, wrecks, is it's hard to get snapper, especially when you're fishing the bottom. If you can chum them up to the surface, you got a better shot. But they weren't being that cooperative for us. So I think as the camera swings around here one more time, there's another good look at this big boy. He's probably 200 to 300 pounder. He's a big fish, and he's on a ledge too. So you can see the ledge back there. That ledge is probably 4 or 5 feet, so he's got no problem fitting up underneath there. There's a little hogfish that swam by him as well. I used to get a lot more snapper and hogs on this spot. It's ceased a little bit, and I'm wondering if our friend there is one of the culprits behind that, because he's definitely going to be eating a lot of fish off these spots. So you can see there's various snapper throughout, and so we didn't wait around too long, especially after I brought the camera up and I looked at it. I was like, oh god, there's one of the reasons we're not getting what we want. So we pushed a little further deeper, and some interesting things happened out there. So by this point in the afternoon, the sun's getting a little lower, and I'm thinking the bite's going to turn on. But the problem we had when we got deeper is the current was also ripping. We were just past the new moon. Makes things a little tougher. There's a lot more water moving around. So you can see here's the bottom of the boat. Now, this is something interesting to me. So as the camera's going down, not too far below the boat, you can start to see these fish. These are mangoes. We couldn't see them from the surface. We couldn't see them on the depth finder because I think what was happening is we were chumming fairly heavily, and since we were chumming, so that's all mangrove snapper. The current was taking the chum back fairly quickly, and so the snapper were coming up very high, 20 feet below the boat, but the current was, pushing them fairly far back. And so as the GoPro's going down, there's more snapper. More snapper. They're even kind of swimming with the camera. They were very active, very interested to see what was going on. This is kind of a big roll-off out a little deeper where it's just a bunch of rocks. It's a fairly big structure. You can see there's some amberjack on it. If you got amberjack on your spots offshore, you're definitely fishing bigger structure. So there's also mangroves on the bottom, which I knew there was going to be some on the bottom. And so we were trying to pretty much get our baits down almost straight up and down as much as we could since the current was so hard. And I'm seeing them, on the camera. And I'm like, wow, there's definitely mangoes on the bottom. I didn't really know that the mangroves were up in the water column. And so something interesting was happening, but let me fast forward slightly so you can see kind of what this spot is. So we were on the up current of it a little bit because we knew our baits were going back. So it's fairly just natural bottom. You can see the roll-off back there. And when I say a roll-off, it's mainly, it's not like a ledge where it goes up and under. It's more of a gradual incline, but it's rocky bottom, hard bottom with, a lot of this natural stuff around it. So that's what I describe as a roll-off. I'm sure there are some, undercroppings, little caves throughout it, but it's not like a defined ledge overall. So there's lots of scamp grouper here. Scamp right there, look at the camera. And there's also one of these one of these big boys. Mr. Hogfish right there. Big male hog. So I am going to remember that for the future. That is a beast of a hogfish for when I go back to this spot. Since we were mangrove fishing, we weren't really fishing, hog balls right on the bottom trying to get them. But I'm definitely going to remember in the future when I'm here, hey, let's send some half shrimp on the hog ball straight to the bottom, and might have a good shot of getting one like that, and it'd be a real beast. So just kind of went real quick through this. There's the hogfish back there again. There's a filefish, which is interesting. We got some scamp grouper coming into the camera now as well. So nice variety of fish, but the majority of the snapper were way up in the water column. And so this snapper here actually ate a free-lined pinfish. I think what was happening with that chum coming so high up and the snapper coming so high up, they were pretty much eating baits right on the surface. I was like, wow, a mango on a free-line pinfish with 60-pound leader, a big 5/0 circle hook meant for tuna. Obviously, they were being a little more aggressive, which coincides with seeing them up in the water column quite a bit. And we actually ended up catching multiple on the flat line. Come back to that in a second. So we caught multiple on the flat line. So Tom here had a whitebait free line. We're still hoping, fishing more than 100 feet, that tuna would be around. But we end up hooking all these mangoes on the flat lines. And they were big fish too. They were 20-inch plus mangoes, which are pretty awesome. So there's another fat mango on the flat line. And then another big mango also on the flat line. So we got 3 big mangoes all on flat lines, despite our best efforts to hook them, jig heads on the bottom. This was the way we were getting them. You think you're almost fighting AJs because they're so big. Pretty awesome experience doing like that. And so the problem we were running into at the bottom, we were actually starting to hook some fish. We actually ran into 2 problems. So the first was we're getting these mangoes on the surface, and we're like, all right, well, let's jump some live bait. And then next thing you know, the kingfish showed up. We're like, okay, well, that kind of ruins that. So we started getting some cutoffs from kingfish when we were trying to hook our mangoes on the surface. But the kings would clean some of our flat lines, so it couldn't really chum live bait. And then the jig head started to work a little bit. I was able to get some fish while I was dropping some. So different type of taxman showed up. I hooked a good fish. I'm fighting up off the bottom on the light tackle, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, where is this thing going? So it ends up being a lot of dead weight. I'm cranking, trying to get as much line back as possible because I'm pretty confident there's a shark after whatever I had hooked. I was hoping it was another big mango. That's kind of what I was fighting like. So I'm cranking, getting all my line back, and I see, oh man, big sandbar shark. So I had a second shot at it again, wanted to see what it was. Ends up being a nice gag grouper. That thing ate wide open as I'm reeling this fish up to the boat. So the hog wall didn't get cleaned off. Ended up getting a head of a gag grouper in the boat. Unfortunate that, big sandbar shark decided he wanted that grouper out of season. I'm like, all right, well, whatever, just take the rest. So I was a little angry at that point. So the taxman was getting everything we were hooking off the bottom after that. Little, different than a goliath, where the goliath, you hook that fish, it's hitting it almost immediately when it's on the bottom. The sharks are hitting your fish halfway up. There's not a whole lot you can do. So it made it tough when You got sharks, glass, all this stuff on natural bottom, and you're trying to lay tackle fish for mangoes and grouper or whatever else. So one thing I definitely wish I would have tried while we were fishing here. So the current's going back. There's our chum. You can see how much the current's moving if you look at that chum bag. It's pretty much straight up and down. If the current's not moving much, that should be. I'm sorry, the current's moving a lot, so it's straight off the back. It's almost like a rudder. When it's straight up and down, then you can tell. That's when you got light current. You can see how fast that shark head's moving back too. So that current is pushing that chum bag straight back. Chum's flying out the back. And that was what after it let down a little too. So one thing you can do to kind of see currents when you're fishing is there are certain buoys. Let me bring one up here. So this buoy that's 50 miles west of basically Anna Maria Island, if you scroll down, obviously you've got your wind data. This one doesn't have wave heights. But this is something that I check fairly often if I'm going out and I think I'm going to be trying to do a lot of snapper fishing, yellowtail and mango, and where it's light current's better. To see how hard the current's moving is kind of important. It definitely helps my game plan. So anything above about half a knot is ripping pretty good. That's pretty strong current. So you can see at 13 feet, 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time, it's almost a 1 knot current. That's extremely hard. And you can go back and you can see there's a lot of data here. What the current is at a given time, over the past, I think up to 5 days. Yeah, so you can come down here, you can click the 5-day plot, and it'll give you a data look at it, a visual data. So you can see what point of the day the currents have been lighter or stronger. So today, April 25th, you can see earlier in the morning wasn't a whole lot of current at the surface, but as you come down, the current was picking up through the water column. And so left side is your depths in meters, and then the bottom is your time frames. So it goes back 5 days. So you can see, every 24 hours it seems to kind of recycle, and this will shift throughout the day. So on that day, on the day when we were having the issue with the current, we were fishing right here in this time frame here. If we had been there earlier, we probably would have been pretty good. This is only a 3-day look, so you can see the difference and how it's a little more spread out, a little easier to read. So yeah, we were fishing the afternoon from about 5 to 7. So we really started fishing right when it was picking up in there. If we had been there earlier, your purples, not nearly as strong. So it would have been a much better time to fish. So what I learned from, these trips, especially this most recent one, the springtime, you tend to get a lot of bait that's moving through the water. I think that's one of the things that pushes a snapper up. You got your schools of Spanish sardines, scalloped sardines, cigar minnows, and all that moving north. And I think it makes the bottom fish a little more active because I'm sure they see these schools of fish and are like, wow, we haven't seen you all winter. We're getting a little hungry. We're going to try to track down a few of these. So that might have been one of the reasons the mangoes were up so high in the water column. The next couple times I went out, we used a lot more deadbait chunking with no weight at all, since the snapper had been so high up in the water column. And long fluorocarbon leader, bury the hook inside, cut thread fin, Spanish sardines, something like that. And that seems to be what the mangoes want to eat. It makes it a little more difficult. You're using a lot of, patience, pulling line off your reel, but it is very effective. So these are just some things I learned. Always like to see the underwater camera to see what's down there while we're fishing. Helps out. Obviously we're fishing pretty good spots, but bite never really turned on. And that's part of fishing. So hopefully you can kind of see what's down there. If you enjoyed, feel free to like, subscribe, leave me a message. Visit my website, captainchappie.com. pick up some jig heads. That's still, I believe, the most effective way for getting mangoes. You just kind of got to time the bite, yellowtails and all that. So hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you very much. Everybody be safe. Take care.